Hello and welcome to day 3 of LudoNarraCon 2021. We are once again the two founders of Kaizen Gameworks, the developers of this hot banger of a game, Paradise Killer. I am Oli and this is...
I'm Phil.
And this video, the previous two videos we've done have been about, thinking about what it's been like after shipping Paradise Killer, and then yesterday's video was what our influences are. And this video we are doing a Q&A of questions submitted by, one would like to say fans, hopefully fans online, using a Google form, and which I'm just going to play the game, and Phil is going to fire questions at me, and at us both. He's going to fire them at himself, and hopefully we can dispense some knowledge that will make the gods fearful of the things that you know.
Excellent. I mean, this is the first time we've done a Q&A since we released the game. And it's interesting because we've had a lot of very specific questions. We've had a lot of questions. When we tried to do a few Q&As before, it's much harder to get people to ask questions about the game they don't know.
Yes.
So this is a very different kind of Q&A than before, where it was mostly talking about what it's like as an indie developer. Now we have some very specific Paradise Killer questions sprinkled in.
And thank you to everyone. Sorry to interrupt that. I just want to say thank you to everyone that submitted a question.
Yeah, definitely. If you don't get read out, really sorry about that.
Right, better questions.
There's never we can get to. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, I'm just going to fire through them in no particular order. Are you ready?
Hit me.
Right, Ragnalls asks, what did you find most challenging about writing a narrative with so many diverse characters? Was it difficult to intertwine all of their stories?
Intertwining all of their stories. They were all born out of the need to fit into the crime. The crime came first, and then we started weaving in the suspects. And one of the reasons we did a fantasy world is so that we'd have complete control over these characters, and we could do as many interesting things as we wanted with them. And so we could have characters. We wanted to have characters that came from all over the world, but they're immortal, so they were born and lived in a period of man's prehistory. So we could have a lot of freedom with that. So in terms of difficulty, the hardest thing was finding everyone's voices, finding the things that make them tick and how they talk. That was the hardest thing. But in terms of intertwining all of their stories, that wasn't the hardest thing, because they were all created to serve the central crime and the timeline of events that make up the crime. And so it was then about fitting people into that, and there were some difficulties with that, about people crisscrossing paths and stuff that we had to rewrite and rework, but really it was making sure that everyone was unique and had an interesting way of talking, or an interesting thing to say, an interesting worldview.
Excellent. Right, next question. This comes from Tired Ghost. Favourite musical tracks?
I'm really bad at remembering the names of them all.
You've got a lot of them, and lots, yeah.
What is current? I really like Knife and Crystal. I really love the vocal version of Stay Forever.
To me, that's nuts. Like, I know like all the soundtracks are quality, but that particular song, it's nuts. That is Paradise Killer's song. Just so good.
And I think 8th Street Rose might be my favourite, because it is so upbeat and summery, and we wanted music that, in combination with the art and the atmosphere of the game, that takes you away to another world. And I feel that one, I can see like a summer's evening, or like a city I've never been to, with that track. What about you?
I really like End of the World. which is kind of this chaotic start and then this kind of reggae, scar-y rhythm throughout. And I just really like that sound, and I think it's quite video gamey as well. And I also like Sunset, which is just a really relaxing, chilled song, which I think, like you, I can imagine sitting on a beach with a beer, just enjoying that soundtrack. That song, sorry.
Yeah.
Right, another one from Tide Ghost. The plot to this game is quite out there.
Sure
How long
is.
did it take to make it? Yeah, so including all the mythology and all that kind of stuff, how long did it take to make Paradise Killer?
Well, if that question specifically refers to how long did it take to make the plot, that was the full length of development. Like some games, you write the plot, write all the script, plan it all out, and then it has to go to a motion capture studio and a recording studio, and you have one day with each actor or whatever it might be, and then after that it can't change. Whereas for this game, we were rewriting parts of the story like days before we shipped, because we realised there was a logic hole or there was a bug or something. So that really did take all of development, and I think we knew that we didn't want to do like fully voiced stuff. We knew we weren't going to do motion capture, so that allowed us a lot of breathing room, and I think will influence whatever we do next with, maybe we shouldn't do a fully voiced game because it means that we can edit and add content right up until it's about to go out the door. And I think that is one of the big things that we did well, was being able to develop such an expansive lore. I'm not saying good, I'm saying expansive. That I don't want to say things that people might disagree with. But with it being expansive, like we could only do that by having an excellent content pipeline that allows us to put either collectibles or new dialogue in very quickly and easily, or and not having the overhead of performance capture or anything.
Yeah, then there's a certain amount of, in order to make a murder mystery game solid, you need to wrap up a lot of the plot holes. And there were some quite late on where we discovered, well, if someone thinks about this kind of breaks the premise. It kind of leaves a hole in an alibi, and you need to be able to wrap that up. And it's far better to be able to do that than to say, well, it's going to have to stay because we can't do all the voice acting again in time, or whatever it might be. Like, everything's got a cost when you make a game. Yeah, very iterative. So, like, took 2.5 years basically. Another one from Tired Ghost. There's quite a few here.
Got some things
Are
to
there
ask.
any more? Well, he has. Quite the Paradise Killer fan, apparently. Are there any more games being planned for the Paradise Killer universe?
We have a bunch in our head that we would like to do, but they are currently not in development, and we don't have any plans for them.
So they may happen, they may not.
I want them to happen. I really want them to happen. All of the ones that we thought about, I really want to do. But what our vision for Kaizen was that we would be, like, people would come to us for a house style rather than a franchise. And so, if you like Paradise Killer, we hope that whatever our next game is has something for you as well. You can see the similarities, you can see the flavour, and you still get out of it what you got out of Paradise Killer in some ways.
Yeah, and we need to be careful as well, because we can't make a Paradise Killer 2 easily, because the issues with how this game finishes. What will the next game be? Will it be a prequel? Will it be this? And anything we do will have to be something fresh for us, at least. Like, we could take the game, put in a bunch of new dialogue, a bunch of new content, and spit it out again, but we'll do something more meaningful than that. I think when it comes down to it, we want to add, we want to keep evolving, and Paradise Killer was a very different thing for us, so we'll see what the next thing in that universe would be. Cool. Next question. The trial and actual crime was absolutely amazing in terms of how it all fit together. What made you go with this amazingly unique, make your own truth route?
Because we believe in player agency and player interactivity, and video games are an interactive medium, and so we believe as much as possible within each game should be interactive. And I find it bizarre how many games want to tell you a linear story and not let you interact with the story. It's weird.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of it is because, speaking from experience, a lot of people that work in games don't think games are as cool as movies and wish they were making movies in some ways and think that they've got a cool story in them. I ain't no storyteller. I'm a game designer. So we made a game that was about converting a story into mechanics and interactivity, rather than just telling you something. And I think that can take lots of different forms within games. Like, I think everybody's gone to the Rapture, and Dark Souls do a really good job of not necessarily you changing the story, but you choosing how much you interact with it by how much you engage with very optional and very, in some cases, hard to find pieces of the lore. And then you get other games like Until Dawn, where you are doing a lot of branching and changing the story. And then there's stuff like, hopefully, Paradise Killer, where you are free to explore the story and then do your own interpretation of it, and then change your perception and the world's perception, the game world's perception of what the story was.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely out of a desire to say, like, choice and consequence is always a big thing for us. So how can your choices actually matter in the game? And it turns out one way of doing that is to let the game be completely agnostic towards how you play it. So it will support you. It will not force you down routes or paths. It just has to understand what you want to do. And if you want to do that properly, then you have to let someone make their own truth. And that's where it came from, really.
I want to be able to design a narrative system that's as good as the player combo system in God Hand. And if we can make, at some point, the God Hand of narrative games, I will be very happy.
Watch this space. Right, and the last one from Tired Ghost is, and it's a bit spoilery, but what is with the Lydia and Sam screen at the end of the game if you do a certain spoilery thing? How come only they have this?
Well, I hope that players can see the Lydia and Sam thing at the end of the game if they go down a certain route, and they can maybe think about who Sam and Lydia are and their history and how Lydia and Sam might be able to enact change on their fate and their future. Also, we want to make a game starring Lydia and Sam, so we put something in that allows us to do that.
Cool. Right, Victor asks, how does Lady Love Dice transition to the next island throughout the exile period if Lydia doesn't ferry her over?
Victor, if you are the person that DM'd our Twitter account about this, I deeply apologise for not getting back to you until now. I only just saw it before this. Like, TweetDeck didn't surface that DM to me very well, so I deeply apologise for not responding to you before. Love Dies is ferried between exile and the Idle Lands by Lydia.
Cool. Yeah, so Lydia comes to collect, moved on, so go through the Paradise Gates and then re-exiled. And related to that, 6, 7 even. No, 6, 7, I guess. I shouldn't be allowed to read. How did Lady Love Die's prison go along between the island sequences? Did it just show up, or was it remade each time?
I don't know if I've really decided that. I think it's.
I always thought it was. I thought it was like, when the island being architected. It's an essential point. There's certain things that have to be in each island, and the exile prison is one of them. And I think, to me, sometimes it's up on a big pole. Sometimes it might be, underground or something.
Yeah.
Like that evolves with the island. So I think it's created each time, and basically someone who's exiled has the experience of being taken out of it, pushed through the Paradise Gates, and put right back in that prison. So, that's why I think of it.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But I also kind of like the thought about it being this weird thing that morphs and changes and persists. But that is purely after playing Control, and the oldest house in that is so cool that I really like that thought of it being almost an entity. But then nothing else in the game supports that view of the idle land, so ignore all of that. It's rebuilt every time.
Right. Mini Miko asks what the inspirations for the names of some of the characters. And a couple of other people have asked similar things, like what's the deal with the names? Why are some like to the end, and then some just like Sam?
So all of the not all, some of the names come from. So Witness is a good example where Witness was the first character that got a name in the very first concept draft of the story for this game. And his role as being the person that oversees the end of the island was determined very early. And I thought it'd be cool, like the Witness to the end. Like, that just sounds cool. Doom Jazz, I've said this before in other interviews and stuff, that I was listening to some Doom Jazz music, so he got called Doom Jazz. Shinji wasn't supposed to be called Shinji. I had to give him a name because he needed to go in the game, and I have a number of Evangelion figures on my desk, and so I looked at those and I thought Shinji, and then I thought I'll change that later, and then it never got changed, and I'm quite glad it didn't. And then I think that question asked like KHX. And I'd forgotten about KHX because a lot of the games, a lot of the names in the game come from me thinking, right, I need to put a name to this character, and then looking around my office, which is where I store all my games, and picking out names from that. So like Crimson Acid is a combination of Crimson Tears on the PS2 and Metal Gear Acid, and KHX is from the Railway Sim game A-Train on 360 was called A-Train HX, I think it was. And I just thought that sounds cool, and so I just put on a letter in front of that HX, and then again that was supposed to change, but then it never did. But then other characters are references to stuff like there's one called Fine Stranger, and that is a reference to Phil's ska band. And if you are a fan of a podcast for degenerates, Two Good Boys, then you might understand where the name Lunatic Pope comes from.
I was wondering if you were going to bring that one up. Awesome. So there you go. Don't have to put too much thought into names. You can literally look around your office.
Yeah, like some developers name their characters very meaningfully, and in our new game, a lot of the characters have very meaningful names that convey a lot about their personality. But I'm not really that deep a lot of the time, and I just like things that are cool, and I think things that sound cool are cool. So there's like no deeper meaning. Like some people have asked, like, is there a deeper meaning to any of these names? Like,
it is what it is. Like Witness to the End is a really cool name. That's what it is. That's who he is.
Yeah, Lady Love Dies was the hardest one to come up with actually, because that isn't a reference to anything. I don't know where I got that name from, but I remember mulling over it for days before finally settling on that and thinking, I'm not sure whether this will make the cut, and then it very definitely did.
Yeah, it has a certain ring to it when we were talking about it, like LLD and LD. And I really like the inclusion of Lady at the front of the name. It's just a really nice feel that. Yeah, it means a lot, and I think it adds a hell of a lot to the game to be able to play as that character. Right, next question. The character design is amazing. What's the creative process for coming up with the interesting designs? And we talked a bit about this in the inspirations video, right? Do you want to quickly go over it again?
Yeah, so the character designs we wanted to do, we knew we weren't going to do 3D characters because very, very expensive, time consuming, and we didn't have the skill set on the team. So we knew we were going to do 2D characters, and so then we wanted to lean into those characters and make them have big extreme clothing and poses that would be difficult to do in 3D. Like, if you think about Lydia's hair, like that would be a nightmare to render in 3D. But we can do it here. Like, some of the clothes would be like a physics nightmare. And you could also do stuff like, I don't know if anyone listening has seen behind the scenes of like the JoJo anime openings, or like the stuff Arxis do with the Dragon Ball fighting game. Like, they break rigs constantly. They stretch arms and legs and make people do like poses that aren't humanly possible. And so we wanted to do something like that, but in 2D. And then a lot of the inspiration was JoJo's Bizarre Adventures used like high fashion. And so what the process was I'd write the bio for one of these characters, write about who they are, think about them a lot, and then go off and collect a load of ref. And who they are was often just like a blank canvas, but a lot of the time they did have to perform certain roles within the crime and the story. So, like, originally I don't think Akiko had a sword, and then it became clear that she needed to hold a sword, so like that fed into some of her character design. And then often we wouldn't have any particular like clear idea in our head of what these characters were going to look like. I would have collected a load of ref, and then we would just give that in like a big collage image to the main character artist Giga, and just be like, here's all the ref, go nuts. And then what they came back with was, there's only, Lydia had, we redid Lydia and we redid Yuri. Lydia, both of those were not because Giga's art was like wrong or anything. I hadn't really given the right ref, and I hadn't really thought about those characters in the right way. But almost,
and they evolved as well. Like,
yeah.
You know, Yuri was someone who evolved, and the first piece of character art we had was fine for Yuri at the time, but as Yuri evolved, the character art was not right.
Yes. And almost every time, you know, we'd hand over this ref pack to Giga, and then we'd get back just something that we're absolutely in love with. And the way we work as developers at Kaizen is like, you know, we find people, either each other or like people we want to work with that we trust, and then we just give them free rein. Like, here's what this thing needs to function as in game, whether it's a mechanic, whether it's a piece of level art, whether it's character art. Here's what it needs to do in game, and here are the themes. Other than that, knock yourself out. We trust you to do something cool, and every time that has been borne out. And I think, you know,
when you're looking for someone and you find someone because of their style or what they can bring, why would you suppress that?
Yeah.
Like, let them be creative and individual, and you know, not everything would fit in the game, but everybody's been very good at identifying what works in the game and giving them a unique take, and I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, like I was really happy with Dead Nebula, which our now art director Rachel did, and she wanted to draw a mascot. I can't remember what came first, her wanting to draw a mascot or us needing a mascot, and and then she just did it. And again, the first thing she did we loved and just went in the game. So you know, that's the kind of kind of thing we do, because I don't know about you, but I worked at a lot of places where that level of trust is not given, and it is, you're watched like a hawk and everything is micromanaged. So with this, it's like, well, I don't want to be like that. I don't want this game to be like that. So let's just give people cool stuff to do.
I mean, I think sometimes I've worked on teams where you get quite a lot of freedom and creativity in your team. You can work really well with someone. But then there is like a management level above that, which will say, no, dial it back, change this, change that. So it's really powerful to have that creative freedom in the team and not to have someone from on high saying, no, you can't do it, or it's not right. Like, we understand what the feel of this game should be, and it's great to allow people to contribute towards that. Right, let's crack on. Got loads of questions left. So, the lyrics in Paradise Stay Forever obviously reference many things from the game and the lore. Was this one of the last pieces to be made for the game, and what was it like trying to turn that lore into lyrics?
Well, it wasn't one of the last pieces. We got those lyrics kind of late in the development process in terms relative to other things, but
I think about 6 months before the end, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah, but we didn't write them. Barry, our composer, wrote them, and again, that's another thing where we just let someone. We said, "Here's our game. You write the lyrics.
What?
We just need to check them at the end," and we read through them and checked them, and they were great. And they just the sign-off process for that was about 30 seconds, and so in terms of his process for writing those, I think he was very good at synthesizing what the atmosphere of the game was without getting bogged down in details. It was all about tone and atmosphere and the essence of it, rather than being explicitly referential or explanatory.
Cool. Related to the music, Noel asks, is there an in-law person who curated the music that plays on the island, or does LLD just blast out her mixtape?
I was unsure about this, and we talked about it. There was at least one day when I thought we would have a named character as the musician, but we both agreed that was probably a bad idea. And
it curated, not created, if that makes a difference.
Oh, well, I guess
I think I read that out wrong.
No, that's probably me not paying attention. I think
to me, I always thought it was. We talked about having a radio station, and I always thought like Dead Nebula, or a Dead Nebula employee would host that. But in my eyes, it is LLD. Starlight can connect to the island, and she is blasting out music, having a great time. Well, as great times you can have solving a mass murder. Right. A question from both Island 24 Citizen and Kai Milo. What happens to Bear Chan at the end of Cycle 24?
We've received other questions about this on Twitter, which is a popular microblogging format. And unfortunately, Bear Chan is not a member of the syndicate. Bear Chan is a citizen's dog, so she doesn't get to move over to the next island.
Bad times. Right. Hoey Bowie asks, in the development process, what came first? The knife? Sorry, I'll try that again. So, Hoey Bowie asked, in the development process, what came first? The crime or the killers?
The crime. We knew that we wanted to do this secret society, this ruling council gets murdered, and then we started thinking about how it would be done, and then who would do it. But when I say who would do it, not like here's a cast, which one of these people would have done it. It was we know what the crime is. We know how at least one person might have concocted a plan to enact it. And then what other aspects to that crime, like what pieces of functionality, what narrative beats are there to the plan of doing the crime, and how do we write characters to fit them? We had some characters hanging around from previous game ideas which were never made, like Akiko and Lydia, and we wanted to work those characters back in, but then like Yuri was created purely to fit the needs of the crime plan, but then it's not like we just put someone in and then just left it at that. It's like, okay, these are the people that we need, these are the functions these people need to do, and then let's develop them into full characters and make sure that they have real purpose and meaning in this world.
If you were an architect for an island sequence, what additions would you make to an island?
Probably a ban on knives. That seems like a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason these islands keep failing is because the citizens are treated like crap, and so they turn to demonic possession and all sorts of nefarious things like that in order to find some meaning in their life. So, without wishing to sound like a big lefty liberal, probably stop oppressing citizens. I think that would probably be a good change.
Yeah, probably is good. I was going to say like a nice jungle area or something would be nice, but yours is probably slightly more meaningful than that.
No, jungle would be alright. Jungle gym, that'd be good at all.
Yeah. Yeah, jungle, up the rendering budget a little bit, so maybe you can't do that. Right, 6-7 asks, was the collectible radar power-up planned or added because finding everything was otherwise just too painful?
Well, I don't think either of us cared whether people would find everything. I certainly don't care if everyone finds everything in the game. Like, I think the reason we added collectibles was so that players could always discover something. I don't think there's any need to find everything. But I'm just trying to trace back the origins of that, because I know we had multiple conversations about it through development about some way of pinging collectibles and seeing stuff, like a way of the player doing an action to see collectibles, and I can't think why I was so set on putting it in the game.
So, yeah, we talked about that for a long time, but the very first time meditation went in as a system, it was actually to reveal ghosts.
Yes.
So you would meditate, and the ghosts that you find now, you had some like environmental clues that might be in the area, and then you'd meditate, and then they'd become visible. That was changed because it was just kind of unnecessary, really. It was just meaningless.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was always a desire to have things pinging around, and I mean, I think some of it is just showing what there is in the island. Some of it is about kind of exposing the supernatural abilities you can pick up on the island, like double jump. But I also think it's just quite cool, like when you look out, you can see this island littered with collectible things. And I was always really nervous about doing it, because that's a lot of stuff to draw on a screen when you're already, up against it in terms of a small team making an expensive 3D world, trying to get those things to render. So I kind of not resisted, but I held off actually putting that system in for a long time. But then when it did go in, it kind of just felt right. And I don't think I've ever used it to go and find a particular thing. But it's nice to know that if you're in an area and walking around, you've been rewarded for doing something in the game which has given you this power, and you can now choose to use it to identify what else is in that area you're in. So it's kind of, I mean, in some ways it breaks exploration because it tells you where everything is, but it does it in a way which also complements the exploration. It doesn't take anything away from you. It doesn't tell you everything is. You have to actively choose to use this feature once you've got it. And it's then up to you to go and find it. But I also think there's one or two things that you won't stumble across unless you just happen to be jumping across buildings. And this does tell you, there is something hidden up on that skyscraper in this balcony area that you can now go and you know where it is, and it's up to you to go and find how to get it. And through that, you can learn how to use some of the game's platform mechanics a little bit more.
I think it's a useful thing as well for people that want to get more out of a game after they're done with it. Like I'm currently replaying. What did I play? I did a couple of playthroughs of Devil May Cry 5 recently, and I'm doing several replays of the Resident Evil 3 remake because I just like spending time with those things, with those games, and they've got a reward system in game that makes that worthwhile. And if you want to spend some more time with Paradise Killer, but you've seen the story through, you can at least go hunting and just kind of vibe in the world while hunting for collectibles.
Yeah, it's like in Dead Rising, you play through it once and then you play through it another time, and you learn more about it. And certain games you can carry over your upgrades and your weapons into New Game Plus. And it's kind of like a version of that, where if you know where to find this power, you can then go and play the game and discover everything if you want to.
Yeah, like it's just I think collectibles in games are not as necessary as games think they are, but it's a cool way of just being able to revisit and vibe.
Well, I mean, not to get off the question, but in collectibles, a lot of games have, go and find 20 of, a scroll or something, and it doesn't do anything. You just find 20 and then someone gives you something at the end. But in this, most of the collectibles, they are at least somewhat unique in their descriptions and what they introduce to the world. They are lore.
Yes.
It's, neither of us wanted to make a busy work game, and neither of us wanted to make a game where you are kind of hounded to complete everything if you want to feel like you've completed the game. Right? You should feel like you've completed Paradise Killer when you are satisfied with the outcome of the trials, which isn't really related to most of what you can find out exploring. That is just all about enjoying the exploration. Right, so that went on for a little while, but let's talk about the next question, which is from Zaf. What would happen if I ate a god?
I think you'd have a pretty bad time. I think you'd also need quite the stomach and a good half a day set aside for it.
Just to dig into that. There's quite a few questions from Zaf here. It's taking time, I'll just pick a couple out. Is Godflesh a reference to the industrial metal band?
No.
I wondered if it was, because I didn't know that. I did not know there was a band called Godflesh. So
I think I searched for Godflesh. Oh, I think I searched for Godflesh as one word because I'd stylise it as one word.
Yeah.
And I searched for that and nothing came up. So I was like, well, I'm in the clear.
Taking that. I mean, there are references to some bands in the game, but that's not one of them. So there are implications that the crime to end all crimes is orchestrated by a third party. How and why did they do that? I mean, before we answer that, do we want to talk about it? It can be quite spoilery.
I ain't going to spoil nothing. But what I'll say is, I don't know what those implications are.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Next question. How does Crying Grudge get to the next island?
It's a great question.
I genuinely haven't thought about that one.
I have given that some thought and then realised it was a question I didn't particularly want to answer. Because,
right, okay.
Because in terms of like a narrative question, because I think I think like there could be multiple overlapping realities here, because they talk about how this island is in a pocket of reality. But is that just the island, or does it extend to those pyramids as well? And is it kind of like does Island 24 and 25 both exist in the same coordinates but in different realities? In which case, those pyramids are timeless and exist in all realities at once. And I think that is a question I'd be more interested in exploring narratively in like another game, like in another Paradise Killer universe game. I think that could be quite interesting. Like, you know, maybe if we were to do another murder mystery game, like it's set in this world, like, well, you know, was differing realities overlapping a method of doing the crime?
Cool. Yeah, good answer. Right. Andrew E. Wiggin from Twitter asks, Vaporwave is clearly a big aesthetical reference for Paradise Killer. What pieces of Vaporwave media do you consider your biggest source of inspiration?
One of the albums that I fell in love with early on was an album by an artist called Bloodwave. I forget the name of the album, but I really enjoyed that. And there was another one by... oh god, I'm completely blanking. I think the album was called like Japan Airlines or something. And they were really strong albums. That was by different artists. They were really strong albums, and they kind of really informed for me what Vaporwave was, with the mashup is the wrong word, but the sampling of different like brand sound effects and creating a sense of liminal space and nostalgia, like no matter where you were, like very powerful music that could take you away to these different spaces and times and realities, no matter where you were. And obviously, like a big influence is why am I blanking on all the album names? The Macintosh, the very first like proper Vaporwave album. It's called Macintosh something, with the pink album cover with the statue head on that everyone knows. Like seeing the album covers for that kind of stuff and those kind of albums, and the just generally like back in, you know, once upon a time used Tumblr, and like Vaporwave seemed very big on that, and people were always doing new types of mashups of, you know, different characters and branding with like different arrangements and styles and treatments to it. And I think like just rather than a single piece of Vaporwave being hugely influential, it was kind of just being aware of that movement and seeing it evolve and develop over a period of time.
Cool.
But definitely that sense. Sorry, definitely that sense of those albums just taking you away. Like those were like big influential albums.
Cool. Right, we've got a couple more left, so we'll try and blast through these. Yeah, sorry, me more. We can't read that one out because of spoilers. But Sarah Chair asks, how does one get deceived by a god, and how do gods bestow their power on the deceived?
So deception varies from god to god. Some like Enchanted Blue speak to you through your dreams and suggest, you know, open you up to suggestibility and influence. Others, like Cosmic Deceit, spoke directly to, because every god is different. It's like there's no like fixed race or species of god. He spoke directly to Romeo Silence, and Damned Harmony is a bit, and Lady Love Dies is a bit unknown at the moment. So I hope we can explore that in another piece of media sometime. But what was the question? How do those gods bestow their power on the deceived? So the gods are psychic beings, and all of like the power in this universe is all about kind of psychic powers. So when the citizens on a Paradise Island worship the gods. They release psychic energy, which the Syndicate then funnel to the gods to give them power. So, because this island sits in a different reality, and because we're dealing with psychic gods, that's how they bestow their power. It's kind of like a force of will. Like when the council birth another island, they are willing another island into existence, and Carmelina is the one that transmutes that will into physical form. So it's a similar thing where the gods are psychically or through a force of will pushing their gifts onto the deceived.
Cool. Right. Same person asks. No, sorry, different person asks. I remember the Paradise Killer Twitter saying there'd been a controversy about what was on top of Henry's head: a hair, a hat, or both. I scored a good way back on the profile page, but couldn't find anything. What is it? What's that all about?
So some people who are clearly out of their minds think that Henry is wearing a beanie hat, but it is in fact a bowl cut. If you don't know what a bowl cut is, then you clearly don't live in the UK. And it is a horrendous hairstyle named because like kids would have a bowl placed over their head and then their parents would just cut around that bowl. And so you've got this dome-shaped hairstyle. And that is what Henry has. Some people, when I say people are out of their minds for thinking it was a beanie, that's possibly a little harsh, because because if they don't have that cultural touchstone, which I didn't think about when we were sorting out the ref for Henry, it would be difficult to understand what was going on. But it is a bowl cut of hair, and we didn't realise there was this controversy until I think there was a stream, I forget the name, was streaming it, and there was some discussion in their chat about whether it's a bowl cut or a beanie, and then they reached out to us on Twitter, and our answer of it's a bowl cut upset a lot of people.
Yes, odd. I mean, I can see why though. Like, definitely looking at it, you could easily interpret it as a beanie, but here we are. Right, Daisy asks, who are the God Hunters and how do they kill the gods?
So the God Hunters in an early draft of the story went by the name the Illuminati, because I think like Illuminati fiction, or when I was a kid, I used to think Illuminati fiction was quite cool, and like Deus Ex, where you fight the Illuminati and stuff. But of course, the modern world ruins everything, and now people who are literally, and I'm not being harsh here, literally out of their minds, believe that the Illuminati are running the world and injecting 5G into us or whatever. And so I took that out because I didn't want to reference anything like that. So the God Hunters are a group of hunters in the real world. In the real world of Paradise Killer. The island of Paradise Killer exists in a separate reality, and then there is the real world where you and I would live. And the God Hunters there are kind of sanctioned, ancient enclave of warriors and hunters that are trying to wipe out the last remnants of the gods. So like some gods, like, is it Moonlight Petal? I think it's Moonlight Petal. Is in a cave system under Siberia, being contained by God Hunters. And like Enchanted Blue is in one of the secret caverns in the Sahara. Again, imprisoned by God Hunters. So they act as prison wardens of the captured gods, and they try to hunt down and kill the other gods.
Amazing. Right, I've just been passed one question by top art director Rachel. This came from Reddit, which was just sent to me. So I don't know who asked it, but reading us on the fly. So First question is, the Vaporwave influence is very obvious and feels very honest and authentic. Often Vaporwave is butchered and emptied, but we didn't do that. We breathed another life into it. Oh, thank you very much. That's pretty nice to hear. Do we listen to Vaporwave? Do we have any favourite musicians? I mean, I think you answered that as part of an earlier question, really. But thank you for the nice words about how we took Vaporwave and did something with it.
Do you know what? I do listen to Vaporwave, but the problem I have with it is that it's difficult to pin down an artist's tracks, because often the way I listen to it is with YouTube compilations, and the YouTube window will be minimised while I work. So I think I don't know if there's a good way of solving that, but I do listen to a lot of like future funk and like Vaporwave compilations on YouTube, and there needs to be a better way of surfacing the artist's name. So,
you need to bind a keyboard prompt or something, so you can just hit add, and then it sticks it in a list for you, so you can reference it later.
Yeah, it automatically opens up their SoundCloud and readies your PayPal.
Yes, that would be the ideal world. And then the second question, which is, the Paradise Killer world building is one of the best I could witness and drown myself into. This person's extremely complimentary.
Yeah.
The world is very flexible and anything can happen there, and it still makes sense. Did you have any particular inspiration for that? Was there any conscious creative decision to make the world so compact, or did it all come together on its own?
Right, there's a few things there. The compact world is... The world was originally bigger. The mountain was cut down to a third of its size, and the world was big. I tend to design big in terms of spaces, and then cut them down. And what we wanted was density rather than expanse, because everything's a bit more meaningful, and it's more fun to traverse if there's lots of small obstacles and platforming rather than running across huge expanses. I think the open world Dark Souls is one of the best open worlds ever, because it's all interlocking and compact, and I don't think ours is as good as that, but I really like the size of it. What was the rest of the question?
The world is so flexible that anything can happen there. Were there any particular piece of inspiration for that?
Yes. So, I'm trying to think.
We did talk a bit about this in that inspiration video, didn't we? So there's some stuff in there.
Yeah, I really like. No surprise to anyone, I really like Suda's Kill the Past universe, because, especially the way that's expanded recently with the inclusion of the No More Heroes games, where a lot of things just are, and they feel contextually right in the world. I hate realism and people that pick apart stuff for plot holes and stuff like that. So when designing, I think it's important to not just be like, anything goes, who cares about anything. It is, anything goes, but then it has to be justified. And that justification doesn't have to be fully exposed to the player, and nor does it have to be super believable in a realistic sense, just so long as people can buy into it and there's contextual believability. And that is what a lot of the Kill the Past series does, with, like, there are at least 2 people in that universe that are purely digital beings that exist in the real world, and no explanation is given for how that happens, just that it has, and if you don't like it, deal with it. And I kind of really like that kind of, like, this is the world I wanted to build into Desuna League. World he wanted to build, and then just enacted it. And I think some of our definitely leaned into that. Like, Sam was created for that purpose, was to show the extent of what is possible in the world with character design, and then add some context so that the player understands how that came about, and expand their thinking about what is possible in this world. Because there are so many realistic games, I just like stuff which is just like here's a completely bizarre world. It's all justified. It's not necessarily not necessarily realistic, but it is justified and hangs together coherently.
Yeah. It's self-aware as well. It knows what it is and doesn't try to pretend to be anything else. And I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, absolute final last question. So many of them. It's such a weird experience having so many questions, and there's probably a bunch we haven't read out, so apologies about that. But last question: how powerful are the gods really? I mean, if we can trap one of them and steal its flesh, then surely not that powerful.
I mean, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say that's being able to trap it. I don't necessarily think is a representation of its power. Like power shows in different ways, and I think, to me, if you are putting enough time and thought into it, you could trap and try and manipulate anything, no matter how powerful it is.
Yeah, I like, I had a somewhat of a Christian upbringing, and in Christianity you have this almighty, untouchable God that is very clearly depicted as a big white guy with a beard, but he's also kind of supposed to be unknowable, and it's like, well, what is he then? You can't have it both ways. So what I like is these like Silent Hill and JRPGs are like that meme, attack and dethrone God, and like that I always found that really intoxicating as an idea, like a god that a person could attack and kill. Like, not just any person, it has to be the right person, but I think that's really cool and as a concept. And so I think our gods are a kind of marriage of that kind of like Silent Hill JRPG style of god and Lovecraft's gods. I'm going to say this again because it's in a different video. I do not endorse anything that Lovecraft has to say about society. He's a despicable human being, but some of his fiction and mythos is really interesting and I don't want to say cool, but obviously piece of shit racist. But his gods are often quite physical, but also intangible. Where like Cthulhu is a huge beast that you might see depicted in like a fantasy novel, but it's seeing it would send someone mad, and I really enjoy like that kind of like otherworldly eldritch being that are gods, but these gods are physical rather than spiritual. And yeah, to Phil's point, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And
like they say,
capture a god.
An idea is unkillable, right? Like you can't kill an idea, but if a god tries to present themselves as anything more than an idea, then they become vulnerable.
Yeah.
There's that kind of thing. Cool. All right. Well, that's all the questions that we've got time for, certainly. And I say again, sorry if your question didn't get read out. It was either had spoilers, which we didn't want to put out there, or I'm afraid it just had too many questions, so we had to pick a few. Thanks to you, Ollie, for answering most of them. If someone was to ask about my favourite math system in Paradise Killer, I'd have been all over that. So you had to talking there.
Well, that's fine. I love talking about all this nonsense that fell out of my head. But a lot of these questions were quite esoteric, which shows how much people have engaged with this game. And a lot of the stuff they were asking about is stuff that I've never verbalised or communicated with you. And if we had some lighter questions, then I think there would have been a lot more for you to take the lead on. But what I think is really cool is just seeing just how in-depth people have gone with some of our themes and design and fiction. And I'm very happy reading these questions. And
it was one of the dreams early on, like throughout these designs, throughout designing the game, there was constantly points where we said, wouldn't it be cool if someone picked up on this or someone picked up on that? And people do. Like, there's the two whiskey drinkers. we said, wouldn't it be cool if people tried to work out who they were? And people have tried to work out who they are.
Yep.
And that is way beyond we expected, because that's not just playing a game. That is deep into a game, and that means so much to us. It's fantastic. So, yes, anyone who's submitted a question, anyone watching, anyone who's played the game at all, thank you so much, because it's unbelievable we're in the position to be able to answer these questions.
Yeah, and thank you for submitting such good questions.
Excellent. Well, this has been pretty good. It's gone on a lot longer than I thought. Lots of really cool questions. But I guess we ought to wrap it up and suggest that everyone goes and check out some of the LudoNarraCon content.
Yes.
So there's demos available, there's discounts on games, there's
supporters pack.
There's a load of supporters pack, and there's loads of panels. So the supporters pack has got some really cool Paradise Killer stuff in it. It's got a couple of tracks on the soundtrack. It's got some wallpapers which we don't think are anywhere else, so you can have some exclusive wallpapers there. It's got some social media avatars, and of course it's got stuff from other games as well. And if you buy the supporters pack, it goes towards funding the next year's LudoNarraCon, which is really important because we took part in LudoNarraCon last year, and that's when we started to see people really kind of respond to Paradise Killer. So it's really important to keep that going and support other games and indie gaming as a whole.
And big thanks to, I forgot to say it in the previous videos, to the moderators at LudoNarraCon. Big thanks obviously to Fellow Traveller for putting this on. It's a great event, and it's really important for so many narrative games, and it provides a great focal point for just the amount of creativity and the amount of wild interpretations people are doing on what a narrative game can be. But also thank you to the moderators for hanging out in the chat and keeping things safe and sane.
Yeah, definitely. Wonderful. All right, well, thank you everybody so much for joining us for this and any other streams you've watched.
Thank you very much. Catch you later.
Bye.